Welcome to Rep Your Brand.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rep Your Brand, a podcast for B2B marketers who are looking to build their careers through a strong personal brand. I'm Nick Bennett. This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Motion. They're a done-for-you podcasting service for scrappy marketing teams in B2B tech. They're two of the nicest guys around, and the work that they do is truly world-class. You can find them at motionagency.io. And today, I'm super pumped. Our guest is Peep Laja, CEO of Winter and founder of CXL, and someone that personally, for me, is a must-follow on social. Pep, thanks for joining me.
I'm pumped to be here, man.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to kind of get into it because honestly, everyone knows who you are. You have huge followings on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I did some digging recently, and I found out some interesting things. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts around it. So when you started out your blog in 2011, there were 7 million other marketing blogs that were out there, and English wasn't your first language. So how did you overcome this imposter syndrome to build your initial business, CXL?
I guess my initial confidence came from the fact that I had built the most popular marketing blog in my native language, which is Estonian. So it was a number one marketing blog. And I was like the number one marketing speaker. I was filling conference rooms with people just listening to me for 2 days and so on. So came from a background where, I have had some success, and that, fed my confidence. So that was one. And then my wife basically encouraged me. It's like, you can do it. You can do it in English as well. And obviously, there, as you said, there were about 7 million or so marketing blogs already. So quite smartly, if I may say so myself, I decided that I got to niche down. Because it's not possible to go head to head with Seth Godin. And so I decided to go for conversion optimization. And I told myself, I'm going to become the number one guy in conversion optimization in the world. And
nice.
So I did.
Nice. That's amazing. It's crazy. You mentioned an interesting piece about niching kind of down. And so I'm similar. So I talk about field marketing. There's no one else on LinkedIn that talks about field marketing. My goal is when someone mentions field marketing, they associate my name with it. Kind of like similar to you. I feel like you built that for yourself. Like, do you, for the people that are listening, they're usually more junior marketers. So would you recommend niching down when you are starting to think about posting content?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about posting content, then getting into the habit of posting is more important. Whatever, anything, because you can always overthink that and be like, oh, I don't know what to say. It doesn't matter. Of course, you will not get a lot of success unless you niche down and unless you're great. Your content is great. Those are kind of prerequisites. But getting into the habit of consistent posting is even more important, I would say. Now, your goal is to build up mental availability. Mental availability is like, I think about a topic, let's say field marketing, I think of you. You're the first guy to come in my mind. So, like, for instance, positioning. Who do you think if I say positioning?
I would think positioning yourself as
who is the name in your mind? Do you have a positioning guru in your mind when I ask you, hey, who's somebody great at positioning?
I think of you.
Okay, awesome. So for most people, I would say it's April Dunford because she wrote a book about it.
That's true.
She does more than 50 events a year talking about it. All her social content is about positioning, obviously bringing a wealth of experience. And she does positioning consulting. It's the perfect thing. And April, a couple of years ago, was nowhere. And now she's runs a one-person consulting company. I can't disclose public figures, but let's say she's doing fine, and it's all because she chose a really niche thing and made it hot and sexy. It's far better to be a big fish in a small pond. It's hard to be, if I want to become a marketing guru, now I have to fight with, I don't know, Seth Godin and Gary Vee and so on. It's very hard to get into the top 3 name selections in somebody's mind. Positioning happens inside the mind. But if you go for a niche that is kind of empty, you can be the first in somebody's mind. So it's a far better strategy. And later you can expand out.
Yep. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And you kind of mentioned something about your wife. And so I want to kind of double back to that piece of it. So the best productivity hack is having children. It forces you to be more efficient. I have a 3-year-old daughter, but you've got over 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. You've got over 40,000 on Twitter. So how has having children helped you optimize the time that you spend on social media?
Social media, yeah. So actually, I am less social than I used to be. It's just because like interacting and like talking to people, I mean, that takes a lot of time. So I'm actually more of a post and fuck off kind of guy. It's a trade off. So consistent posting is very important for me. I maintain like a list of ideas and content to post, and I try to post first thing in the morning when I go to work. Like maybe the first thing, or maybe if I have a meeting, it's like right after that. So, but like very early in the day, I try to get it over with, and I also try to post on the weekends. And if you just do if you post a lot, writing the post gets easier and faster all the time. At first, like when I tried to push my colleagues here, oh, it took them 30 minutes, 40 minutes to do a tweet. Yeah, okay, that's a lot. But like for me, I mean, okay, 3 minutes maybe if I have to think, come up with the content on the spot. But yeah, so I don't do any doom scrolling, or try not to do any doom scrolling. I work 8 hours a day. I got 2 businesses to run. So you got to prioritize things, and so just hanging out on Twitter with friends is not really a productive use of time at work. I mean, after work, I mean, sure, I'll tweet with some friends too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so you have several brands involved with your businesses, and you've said on a podcast that I was listening to recently, the SEO for the Rest of Us one, you can't be more than one thing to somebody. So
That's right.
how do you manage your personal brand across the different businesses that you run, from an agency to CXL Institute to your new business, Winter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it starts with you getting clear on who you are. And the best way to go about it is like, well, what are you actually interested in? So I don't really care about what the audience wants to hear about. I mean, I care a little bit, but mostly it's like I'm authentic to myself by posting about stuff that I'm interested in. And that is usually tied to also what I'm working on. And then if I'm interested in, I can bring passion to it. It will resonate with some people, and hopefully it's something that other people are also interested in. But like I don't believe in like pandering. I mean, you can get great success by pandering to the masses as well. You can see it on LinkedIn. Well, people are posting daily these fucking empty motivational quotes and stories of, oh, I saw this guy and this taught me a lesson about sales. Like, shoot me now. Like some people fucking eat that shit up. So I guess any kind of content can work, but I believe in like the bring your whole self to Twitter, basically. And so I was all about conversion optimization. I used to be, but then I just got burned out. I was like too much into it. I was like writing hundreds of blog posts, speaking at hundreds of events. And I was doing consulting, so I just couldn't explain. If you ask me what is a p value, I will kill you on the spot. And I got interested in other stuff that I'm mainly talking about now. I got interested in strategy, business strategy, marketing strategy, mainly an overall business strategy. Anything from recruitment to product strategy, like how it all works together. Competitive strategy, I guess we could say. So I'm really nerding out about that stuff. I got really interested in differentiation, positioning, messaging, and so I've been talking about that. Of course, it coincides with what my company Winter is doing, because also I started it because I was actually interested in the topic. It wasn't random.
Nice. That's it's really interesting. It's, when you mention the piece about you basically post the content that you want to post, do you actually respond? Like, there's a lot of well-known influencers that will post content and then they just don't take the time to respond to people that add, value. I'm not talking about people that throw emojis or like, oh, that's a good statement. Like,
Hmm.
do you take time out of your day to like respond to people
So it really depends on the. I don't reply to every comment. I mean, if there's only a couple, sure. And also depends on the day of like what else do I have going on that day? Because really, the lifetime of a social media post is a day max, right?
Yeah.
And so really depends what else do I have going on those days. Because sometimes I have more meetings than other days, and especially if it's like client stuff, I got to do sales or whatever it may be. I do try to chime in. Like, what I have learned not to argue with people on social. If they disagree with me, first of all, great. This is social media or the internet. Somebody disagrees with you. Who, that's how internet works. People disagree. So I try not to get into the arguments because you're not going to persuade anybody. You know, if somebody is really commenting and trying to invalidate what I said, I might clarify my position once, but I'm not gonna get into the back and forth because it's a waste of everybody's fucking time. Yeah. So in principle, in social media, what I think is like, who has the most followers? It's not people who are the most active on replying to everybody. It's who are famous. Like Elon Musk gets like 1 million responses to every tweet. Does he reply? No. Or The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Like, none of these people respond to fucking anybody, and they have the biggest engagement. So you don't need to do it. Of course, it helps the social algorithm because even your reply, your comment to your own post counts as engagement, and it feeds the algorithm. So if you have the time for it, go for it. But as they say, be skeptical of the CEO or be skeptical of the marketer who spends all their day on social talking about that stuff and not doing the work.
Right.
So, social does make money. I'm a bit, I have personal data on this, but it's not like you spend your life there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you actually bring up a good point because recently Dave Gerhardt was on this podcast, and so he believes the personal brand is the new company brand. And since you have a variety of businesses, what's your thought on that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who wants to follow company handles like at HubSpot or I couldn't give a shit about at HubSpot. However, I'm following Dharmesh, I'm following Kieran, and many of their marketing people, Scott, and so on and so forth. That because they post interesting content, and also you relate to humans. You're actually building relationships. When you engage with the post and whatever, even if they don't reply back, in your mind, you're like, I follow Jason Lemkin. I don't interact with Saster. I interact with Jason Lemkin's posts. He doesn't know who the fuck I am. But like in my mind, we have a relationship. It's funny how that shit works. Also, like people tell me they've been following me for years, and like they have a whole this relationship in their head with me, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? But that's how it works. So. I'm a big believer. So there's a case studies. There's this British agency called Rise at 7, SEO, content marketing, things like that. And 2 years old, and they've become the employer of choice for a certain demographic. So people who want to work at agencies, they want to work for that agency in 2 years. How did they build that reputation? And how they did it is like, they are recruiting people who are already active on social. And then they encourage all their employees to post daily, all day long on Twitter and LinkedIn. And they get clients who allow, the Rise at 7 people to talk about the work. And so they always talk about the work they're doing, which is interesting. And that has built the whole brand of the company. So they have built an employer brand. And 2, they're attracting all their clients also through organic content on LinkedIn, not from the company handle, but from the employees. So it 100% works.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this actually kind of leads into my next question. You have a team of, I believe, 40 to 45 people across your businesses.
Like 60 or something. Yeah.
Okay. All right. A little off. So when you go to hire someone, how do you evaluate them? Do you factor in how they communicate on social media or in other content they produce?
Well, it really depends on the role, right?
Yeah, right.
Developers, I don't really care. Mainly, I care about if they have the skills to do it. Now, on our agency Spiro, it is important because, like, I think in the agency side, agencies are kind of in the business of expertise. People hire them to add value because they're like the best at something. So our agency is the best at managing experimentation programs, and people will only find out that you're the best if you talk about it, right? And so we try to do the same as Rise at Seven, but the difference is that our people, for the most part, have not been previously active on social. It's like, hey, you should post. Look at me. It's a lead by example. The leadership is posting, trying to bring others along. It's far more difficult than getting somebody who's already active. So we haven't really used how active somebody is on social as a hiring criteria. But going forward, I think depending on the role, it's more and more important, especially in marketing. So right now, I'm in this position where I'm hiring for a head of growth role, and a lot of applicants I get to have zero social media presence. It does make me wonder. I mean, if you're a head, you're like a manager, you manage a team, and you're strategic. It maybe doesn't matter as much, but I sure would be helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned on Everyone Hates Marketers that at one point you got tired of being a consultant and just
Yeah.
explaining the same things over and over again. But with that being said, a lot of people advise marketers to pick a niche, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, and focus just on that one thing where they create content, either Twitter or LinkedIn. So like, how do you manage that on your side right now?
In terms of how to not get burned out.
Exactly. Yep.
So I think it's like I'm not hammering the same idea over and over and over. That will be tiring. You will get burned out. So I'm always trying to push my craft and like keep learning. And then I'm tweeting and posting about the new shit that I'm learning, or maybe not really also new shit, but maybe shit that I haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
And I'm always, I think, in order to post interesting social media content, two things need to have two prerequisites. One is like you need to feed your brain with new ideas constantly, and you do that through two ways. So one, you take thinking time, solo time. You write, you journal, and some people are better than others when it comes to generating original ideas. I'm not a very good original thinker. I'm a synthesizer. So based on I bring my life experience, something I heard in a podcast, a conversation the other day, and now something I read in a book. It's like, ooh, it all comes together. Eureka! Now I have inspiration. It all makes sense. And also, the older you get, the more pieces you have to connect together. It's much harder when you're like 23 and you're just a spring chicken. And that's fine.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to basically talk about new stuff all the time. Like if I had to only talk about how to write great headlines, I would totally kill myself or everybody else.
I love it. And so, I mean, you're known for having a strong opinion, and that's something that I love, because I feel like there's so many people, like when I follow your content on social, like you're not afraid to tell it like it is. But there's so many. Chris Walker is similar. He goes against the grain a lot, but there's so many other people that post content, and it's always the same thing. They say the same thing. There's never any disagreement. So, for someone that's a younger professional, how do they go about creating a strong point of view on their own?
I think there's just no way around than just experience. In the early stage, I wouldn't try. I mean, if you have some, fine. It's probably going to be wrong. Just be very okay to be wrong. Don't get idea fix, where you're stuck with one idea. I have to be right. Like how stories about Steve Jobs, for instance. Like he was like, I'm right and this is the way it is. But as soon as he learned that he was actually wrong, he was quick to admit it and change his position. In fact, he went to his team members like, you should have argued stronger that I was wrong. Like, why did you let me win that argument? Things like that. So be okay to change your mind. In fact, I think it shows a strength of a character if you're ready to change your mind. When the facts change, your opinion should change as well, or when in light of new evidence. So don't try too hard when you're young to have a point of view. I think those things emerge over a lifetime. Now, if I look back at myself 10 years ago, some of the things that I felt strongly about, and maybe made a poked a little fun at others about, that was actually not very accurate, or like it was limited. There's a lot more nuance that you pick up along the way, and also like what matters and what really doesn't matter, and like the tactical to strategic, mm, say, horizon. When you're younger in the career, you really care about tactical shit. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, what does the CTA say? Doesn't fucking matter, man. It's like, yes, it can have an impact, but like in the big picture, there are other things that matter, 100x more.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's super important for everyone listening. Definitely take that piece away right there, because that is, I think a lot of people stress out over that. So with the different businesses you have going on, you still find time to produce content. We've talked about that on LinkedIn and Twitter. Like, how do you brainstorm and generate your ideas, or like, what's your workflow typically look like? Do you have like a log or a journal or whatever?
Yeah, so I'm always listening to an audiobook, always. So whenever I drive, which is not a lot these days, unfortunately I live pretty close to my office, so my commute is like 12 minutes. So it's like, already at the office. Well, the days when I'm picking up the kids from school and I have like a 20-minute ride, and I'm like, yes, can listen to the book. So listening to the book, and as soon as there's an idea that really speaks to me, I take notes. So when I'm driving, I usually pause the book and think about it, and then I write down those ideas. Usually, I send a DM to myself on Slack. So I'm slacking myself these ideas. So my Slack thread with myself is a long list of ideas. Also, when I'm reading a book, I'm like taking screenshots of paragraphs that speak to me, or like if you have Google phone, you can copy paste from books text. So I do that just to memorize, or like, and then I think about these things. Also, when I'm lifting weights, I'm a big weightlifter. I listen to podcasts, and again, if something speaks to me, boom. If I see a tweet that inspires something, I file it in I DM myself. So I've always things that spark something with me, that resonate with me, and I just DM myself. And so every morning, I was like, sometimes I have something on my mind. Other times, open up my DM list and see what in the list is like something that I feel I could speak about today. So, oh yeah, that idea. Let's explore that one. And most of my social posts are notes to self. So like if you want to clarify your own thinking about a thing, write it down. And why not broadcast it? And if nobody else cares, like if you get 0 likes and other these engagement metrics, it's whatever. The value is in clarifying your own thinking about it and solidifying your own thinking. So even if nobody else is listening, tweet like dance like nobody's watching, tweet like nobody's seeing your tweets.
It's so true though that you mentioned that, because like the reason that I started this whole podcast was because I wanted to talk to people that I could learn from. I don't care if there's no one that listens to the show. Like hearing from people like you, Chris Walker, Justin Welsh, like I can implement all this stuff in my day to day. Granted, there is fortunately people that do listen to it, but like that was my whole purpose of creating this. This is like to help me be a better marketer in the long run.
Exactly, and it's also kind of like you could take an ABM strategy, where it's like I don't think you want to sell anything to me, maybe, but usually it's like, okay, who are all these people? Eventually, I want to sell something to. So it starts with them being aware that I exist, and then you invite them to your podcast, your webinar, your virtual event, all these things. Like I'm a big event organizer. I have 2 conferences, CXL Live, there's a lead camp in Europe, there's Winter Games, there's an online series. I invite speakers that I want to get to know. I want to get on their radar, or they're already friends of mine and I want to see them again.
Yeah.
So there's value in there, whether somebody's in the audience or not. Those things matter.
Yep, absolutely. And so I think we're coming up on time. I just had one final question for you, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts here. So for the marketer who has never posted a single thing on LinkedIn or even Twitter for that aspect, what would you suggest they post about for the first time?
The easiest way to start is like in your career, you'll learn some things. So make a list of like hindsights. And usually this is like, what would you tell your younger self 2 years ago or 5 years ago? what have you learned about whatever your job is, like about hiring, about, what are 10 things I've learned about SEO, maybe if you're an SEO person, or client relationships, or anything like that. You can easily come up with 10 things you've learned. Each of those 10 things you can turn into a thread, because Twitter character limit is what it is. So hard to fit it inside a tweet. So I would start there, and then if you start thinking about it, you probably don't have just 10 things you learn. You'll learn 20 things and 30 things, maybe 100 fucking things. And so you could write it up in a bullet point list somewhere in Google Docs, and just each time take one thing you've learned and expand on it.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's definitely how I started. I started getting serious about March of 2020, and just kind of didn't look back, because it's like you get going, and then you start realizing, like you said, you do know more than what you do. And like I just basically put tactical stories of like, hey, I did this, I fucked up, but like, okay, I learned from it. What can I do to be better? And like people love that type of stuff.
Exactly. And don't be afraid that, oh, well, what do I know? It's like, well, yeah, don't take a teacher's position. Don't be a guru on a mountain. Share what you've learned. I mean, to your peers, to your younger self. There's always somebody who will find it engaging.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, Pep, this was fantastic. Where can people go to learn more about you? Anything that you want to plug here, feel free. We'll make sure to throw it in the show notes.
Well, my social media, really, like I'm active on LinkedIn and Twitter, so just follow me there.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with us. It was great having you on the Rep Your Brand podcast.
Thank you.